Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Two more names coming off the board on the head coaching list. Are the Lakers going to miss their man? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. I almost jumped straight into the read, Andy. I said where you get your prize picks. Today's episode is brought to you, of course, by Prize Picks, the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNBA, for a first deposit match up to $100. You can also head over to Locked On Lakers on YouTube and hang out with 24,000 plus subscribers, Andy, all of whom are following a very busy Thursday in the NBA coaching world. We will get to those names. Mike Budenholzer, not quite hired yet in Phoenix. Charles Lee, the Celtics assistant, very well regarded, was seen as one of the guys on the Lakers' potential shortlist. He's going to Charlotte. Budenholzer, of course, is free to go to the vacancy in Phoenix because the Suns let Frank Vogel go after a long series of summit meetings and in conference rooms in Phoenix, presumably that were filled with getting Mike Budenholzer's agents on the phone and seeing if you could get this deal done pretty quickly, because the news of Budenholzer broke about 37 seconds after the news that Vogel was out. It's kind of an interesting thing. Like, Frank Vogel is now a new name that is added to the available pool of experienced head coaches. Of course, won a championship with the Lakers. I put out as more of like a thought exercise, the idea. I asked Lakers fans, like, where would you put Frank Vogel on your list of potential Lakers head coaches? Like, would you be interested in bringing him back? And I meant this more as a kind of a thought exercise. What do you think of Frank Vogel? How do you compare him to other coaches? And we can get into that in a second. But you might have taken that, you might be taking the concept of Frank Vogel as a person the Lakers should consider more seriously than that, which I found out when we were kind of talking about it.
Well, first, before we even get into that, I just want to take a moment to point out, just because given this period of turmoil for the Lakers and the seeming never-ending carousel of coaches and the Lakers' inability to just fill this position, it may make Laker fans just feel slightly better to know that the Phoenix Suns, their Pacific Division rival, they are run by an effing lunatic. Like, Matt Ishbia is an absolute straight up loon. Like, that guy. Remember last week we were hearing from him in this press conference that, the house is not on fire. The media is making this out to be a thing, blah, blah, blah. And the house was not on fire, but the problem is Matt Ishbia is an arsonist. So he's just continually, he's going to have his third coach in 3 years. We're like a week away from Matt Ishbia publicly declaring that he traded Bradley Beal. And then people are going to be like, he's got a no trade clause. They're going to be like, I'm Matt Ishbia. I'll trade whoever the F I want, man.
Beal's just going to be showing up at the facility with like a red stapler, basically just trying to kill time. They went from having like the worst owner in the NBA and Robert Sarver for like being abusive and misogynistic, but also as an owner, like not spending money, like he was just inconsistent, very cheap, to now having a person who almost spends too much money.
They went from
therefore thinks everything should be fixed and work perfectly because it was my idea. I'm a billionaire and I spent all this money. Now make it a thing.
I do think the idea, though, if the Lakers, and according to, say, Dan Wojcicki, who covers the team for the LA Times, friend of the show, he has a recent piece up at the Times about how the Lakers going through their search, the things they're going to be looking for. And one of the things that will not be exclusive in terms of the candidates, but something that they apparently will be putting a premium on is experience. And the candidate pool of experienced coaches is not that deep, particularly if Mike Budenholzer to Phoenix is a done deal.
Which, again, was reported like as fast basically as Woj's photo minions could replace
Let me tell you something.
The picture of Frank Vogel in the breaking news picture with the picture of Mike Budenholzer in the breaking news window. And again, this probably, as it turns out, is the reason I'm guessing I've done. I got my own problems. I'm not diving into like doing reporting on what's going on in the Suns coaching position, but like, you know, I'm sure a lot of this time was taken with them being in contact with Budenholzer's people, making sure they could come to an agreement quickly if that's who their guy was. But like, good Lord, man, I'm like 47 seconds out of my job and we already know who's replacing me. Come on.
But anyway, like if you believe that the Lakers are going to be putting that premium on experience, then it stands to reason that Frank Vogel will be on the list, beyond the fact that he actually led the team to a title 4 years ago, and in the eyes of many people, even as an imperfect coach, was scapegoated because of the Russell Westbrook trade going sideways, those two not getting along, and it becoming clear at the time they were never going to be able to move Russ for a deal that they wanted, so one of them had to go.
And the front office actively undercut his authority inside the organization.
They never bought into him to begin with.
Right. And he was not their first choice. He was not their second choice. And you know, you never got, like you say, the impression they were ever really behind him. And Frank knew that. He's not a guy who has enough gravitas in the league to coach without, you know, the safety net of the organization behind him. Now, look, they might have ended up eating that money anyway if they gave him a 3-year extension instead of their fake, you know, I believe he was put on an hourly at that point for his final year. And so like that stuff matters. Do you think there is a chance that the Lakers would reach out to him? I do not think they would do that. I don't think Rob would go back to Frank, but like the admission of the mistake that they made in letting him go becomes so like loud at that point. I don't think they would do it.
I'll say this: if it's because it's an admission of a mistake, then that's compounding a mistake. Mm-hmm. And frankly, if Dr. Buss could find a way to bring back Phil Jackson a year after dismissing him and deciding that he didn't want to be working with him anymore, you know, taking this a step further, if Kobe and Phil could find a way to work together again, because that was as ugly a split between coach and player as you will ever seen. That tenure ended badly and ugly. And if that thing could work together again, I'm not saying the Lakers should automatically rehire Vogel, because he may ultimately not be what they decide they're looking for.
And he's not Phil Jackson.
Sure. But you know, Rob Pelinka and Jeannie Buss respectfully do not make Dr. Buss. So, you know, it's all relative, and the organization is a couple seasons removed from a three-peat. Like, let's put this all in perspective. I would say if they're not talking to Vogel, if they're not even reaching out to Vogel because they don't want egg on their face, that's a mistake. That's a straight up mistake.
I wonder too how Frank would react. I mean, I'm here for it. I mean, it could be very interesting. I wonder how the players would react. I mean, is they, you know, a little bit of time away, you know, maybe it looks more relative, like, hey, maybe we had something decent with Frank, maybe we can reassemble something. But it gets to kind of the space that Frank Vogel occupies in like the NBA coaching hierarchy. And like you mentioned, the list of coaches that are available to them. This is why I asked the question. I kind of see Frank Vogel as like the median NBA head coach. You probably do better. You can certainly do worse. He's kind of a Rorschach test in a lot of ways on like how you think of other candidates. And so the reaction we got from people at Cam Brothers on Twitter is interesting, but I also think it's interesting to look at, Frank relative to the names, Dan Wakey's story, all these other things. We'll get into it next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. The easiest, most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more than or less than on 2 or more player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the playoff action. Win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to the next level during the postseason going on right now in the NBA. It is fun, and you can win up to, again, 100 times your money with basketball, but also hockey entries, those playoffs on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. They now offer Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this basketball season. Again, really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
Locked On Lakers also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, fire extinguishers. That's an important one for anything Andy's driving, and more. And whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered, and with over 122 million parts for your #1 ride or die. Again, many of those are fire extinguishers. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So, I mean, when I asked that question, Andy, at Cam Brothers to people, I got a lot of like, oh, the Lakers would never do that. And I agree, but that wasn't really my question. My question was to you as a fan. Like, what do you think of Frank? Would you rather have Frank Vogel in a vacuum? Would you rather have Frank Vogel or Mike Budenholzer? Well, that's not a choice anymore. So I'd probably take Budenholzer, but I don't think it's that obvious a choice. Would you rather have Frank Vogel or Terry Stotts?
I'd pick Frank. That's an obvious choice. I'll take the guy that's younger and who's done more in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'll take Frank.
Terry Stotts is too old to me.
Yeah, I mean, I could see he becomes almost automatically a transitional head coach. He's not going to be here for longer than 4 or 5 years.
He's pushing 70 for an organization that needs to land on somebody that might last for, I don't know, the rest of this decade. He's not practical.
It's pretty ambitious.
It is very ambitious.
And then, like, who else is there in the? It's Kenny Atkinson or Frank Vogel. I mean, that's a conversation. I think we will, as this, they start interviewing people, do a little more deep dives into Atkinson in Brooklyn and what he's done on Steve Kerr's staff, where he's been a lead assistant for a few years now. But again, I don't think it's a slam dunk. There's a conversation to be had there. And then you ask the question, Andy, Steve Kerr or David Adelman, Steve Kerr or Mike and Nori, or you could have said Charles Lee before he was
Steve Kerr, Frank Vogel.
I'm sorry, Frank Vogel, or Steve Kerr is not available. Frank Vogel, or those guys, like that group of people. And that really, to me, is less of a referendum on Frank versus the qualities of those guys, because most of us don't really know, like, exactly, like, there's not a body of work for David Adelman to compare him to that's the same as Frank. But, like, would you rather have Frank or a guy with no head coaching experience? Or would you rather have Frank or JJ Redick, a guy with no coaching experience? So that's why I asked the question. because I feel like he kind of frames the what do you want part of it. What qualities do you want in a market where there isn't a bright shining star that you say, go get that guy?
Yeah, it's interesting. The tweet that you put out, I would say the response to bringing back Frank Vogel, just from the fans' perspective, forget whether or not the organization would do it, forget whether or not Frank Vogel would be interested. I would say the reception was pretty lukewarm. I put up a poll in the community section of the YouTube page asking how fans felt about Frank Vogel 2, Electric Boogaloo, 2 Frank, 2 Vogel. It's early, but 68% are saying pass. And one of the things that I find very interesting about this whole process going on right now and the general consensus among fans, and we even saw this with some of the reaction to our discussion about Mark Jackson. It's not surprising that it sparked a lot of wide reaction, a lot of people pushing back against our thoughts on why we would not be interested. Appreciate people leaving, regardless of how much you disagree with us, regardless of how much our opinion seems to piss some of you off. Glad to hear from you. Mm-hmm. But even with that, the big thing I've noticed about this is there's nobody that's out there right now that really seems to have the fan base excited at all. Like, as a general consensus, there's nobody.
And that's okay, because we're not the ones who are. I mean, I think if fan opinion is important in the sense of you want people to be excited, you want the coach to feel like they got a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of leeway to build something where people aren't freaking out, and you don't get responses like Darvin gave about like getting angry with people for living and dying by every win and loss. It's a really bad answer from Darvin there. It's okay if fans aren't wild about any candidate. I feel like if they hired Mike and Nori, had they hired Charles Lee, he comes in and he's like, you're a former Celtic, came from the Celtic staff, and now I'm looking forward to, beating the green twice a year. It's fine. Like, these guys could build up some,
sure.
David Adelman could build up a rapport with the city and kind of give himself a honeymoon period. But the big question,
and sometimes fans are excited about coaches that don't end up working out. I mean, the overwhelming consensus, like with Luke Walton, was everyone was excited. Yes. Fans were excited. Media Absolutely. Thought it was a great hire. They were really, really excited within the organization. We know this for a fact.
Everybody, they fired Byron as fast as they did. I asked Mitch this question, because they moved quick on Byron. I said, is part of the reason you moved so quickly on Byron is because you didn't want to lose out on Luke? And he said, not even like, he said, yes. The answer was yes. Luke Walton, young coach. And that's but it makes me wonder, is there a through line between inside the candidates they want? If whether it's Terry Stotts now and Kenny Atkinson and David Adelman and Mike and Nori, JJ Redick, if Mark Jackson, if you want to put him in there, is there a through line between these people that indicates that the organization has an idea of what they're looking for in a head coach? Because that, more than anything, I was excited. I thought Luke was a good hire. I thought, there was no reason to believe Luke wouldn't be a good head coach. He came well recommended by some very smart people in Golden State. Had coached enough games on the sidelines with that run when he was there for Kerr. And I was excited by Darvin Ham. Again, very well recommended, and all that stuff. Was I less excited about Frank? Sure. He ended up winning a title. The guy with no experience that you can, it's the same phenomenon we get with Max Christie, where because they've not done anything, you can project a lot of what you believe and want them to be onto them. And you can do that with Nori and Adelman and, JJ Redick and, Rajon Rondo or anyone like that. Terry Stotts, what are you getting? You're getting Terry Stotts. Like, it may not be a bad thing, but it's Terry Stotts. Like, nobody gets excited over Terry Stotts. Mrs. Stotts doesn't get excited when Terry comes home. Like, I don't know. It's like, this is where it is. But I need an indication that the Lakers have a through line for what they're looking for, and the qualities of the guys that are at the top of their list overlap in some ways. Not every way, because that's impossible, but that they overlap in important ways that shows that the organization has a philosophy behind what they're looking for, style of play, and in quality of coach.
Well, we can try to suss together, given the options out there, who they are rumored to be interested in and what we've seen since 2011. Do we think they know what they want in a coach? Talk about that next. Locked On Lakers brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here, talk more about Monopoly Go. And I know you're saying technical foul. You guys have already talked a lot about Monopoly Go, but there's just a lot of good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together, build up each other's tournaments, and the more you win together, the more there are awesome prizes you can unlock. And there's so much to get, like unique stickers. You can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel boards with, emojis for taunting your friends when you mess up their game. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with changing tournaments, different challenges. You can dig for treasure or for a robot pachinko machine. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench, go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on.
Are you confident that they have a good process here?
No.
How come?
I mean,
just no process there seems to be good.
What over the last 13 years would give me, even taking into account that a chunk of that process was Rob Pelinka and Jim Buss and Mitch Kupchak. This is going to be the third coach that Rob Pelinka's hired since 2019. So what would give me any indication that there's a good process in play right now to land on the right guy? It doesn't mean they won't land on the right guy, but a big recurring thing I've been saying about this organization since Phil Jackson is I don't think they know what they want in a coach, because I don't think they've given it a ton of thought, because I don't think they think the coach is that important, because they focus so much on getting superstars so they can keep their team as ready-made for a championship as possible from their perspective. Like, this is how you go about building championship teams. And I think some of the details that aren't directly linked to your superstars, including coach, I don't think those details matter as much to them. For example, if the Lakers really cared that much about the coach, they wouldn't have a reputation for an unwillingness to pay their coach. Like, particularly when you are the Lakers. Like, the idea, just because you feel like the Lakers lore would lead candidates to be tripping over each other to coach for you, doesn't mean you have to go prove it. You know what I mean? Like, you could make them trip over themselves to coach you, A, because you're the Lakers, and B, because you'll pay them. You know why? Because you're the Lakers. Like, I don't think that they really consider on a lot of different levels coach worth the investment. So no, I don't have a lot of faith in the process. Again, doesn't mean they won't land on something.
Because I don't want to be. I agree with you, because I just don't. I'm innately distrustful of them. I don't think certain places inside the organization, the scouting department, and all these things. I know we've been responding to a lot of stuff over the last couple of days about Jalen Hood-Schifino, and like I think people are jumping the gun on deciding Hood-Schifino's bust. Like there are plenty of outcomes here where Hood-Schifino is just as good as Pajemski, just as good as Jaime Jaquez and all that kind of stuff over time. He just wasn't this year. And like you could argue, and the point being, like they've built up a pretty good record, and no scouting department, no drafting department gets 100% correct. And I've seen people say, well, Max Christie is like, if you get a second round pick who can play in the NBA and stay there, you've won. Like you can't.
The problem with Max Christie was not
team. Right. It's Darvin wouldn't let him develop.
Right.
But
the problem with Max Christie was apparently he's not Cam Reddish. Like that was actually his biggest problem. The problem wasn't Max Christie.
What a valid criticism. And so, but like you don't build your team through second round picks. Like you don't expect stars. Like you can find a guy who can stay in the league. They chose wrong between Caruso and THT, but THT has lasted in the NBA longer than most second round picks. So even he's not a bust. I feel like they got a good guy that I was hoping they would get the last time. My bigger question is, are they going to figure out how to instill in their coach the organizational support? They didn't give it to Frank. It seemed like they were trying to lend it to Darvin, but then they also couldn't figure out how to smooth over what was going on with Darvin and the other, like whatever the work that Rob Pelinka and the front office need to do post hire. Because I worry that they're going to, I can't tell you if Mike and Nori is a better hire than David Adelman. We're going to do some scouting reports. We'll try to get as much information as we can. But when we're done with those things, I still can't tell you because it's an unknowable thing. They both seem like excellent young assistant coaches that are worthy of a head coaching job. And they both have some positives to them. The organization has to support them and understand that year one isn't going to look like Spo, in year 14 or whatever, he is. And, they're not in a position, especially if they hire somebody who is new to this, that they can just hold them to that. Well, we think we should be contending to Western Conference Finals without pointing that inward. You know what I'm saying? Like, you better, if you're going to have that expectation, you better build that guy a roster that should go to the Western Conference Finals.
Well, I mean, you need a roster that's built for the Western Conference Finals. And to be fair, they thought they had one because it was literally a roster that went to the Western Conference Finals. But, they need to be giving that coach support that feels tangible and real. But this is also the byproduct of a roster that is built around the idea of LeBron only has so many years left. So we know it's borrowed time. And that may be true, but that doesn't make it any easier or sometimes more realistic to win a championship just because the sand in the hourglass is running out. The situation's the situation. And if you treat everything as we have to hit a home run every single time, anything other than a home run is unacceptable, then what you're doing is skipping process. And it doesn't matter that LeBron's turning 40. There still needs to be a process. And, I think that's led to, that type of mindset of we have to make this happen now because of where LeBron is. That's what leads to making a drastic swing, like trading for Russell Westbrook. Like, the idea, well, Anthony Davis got hurt in the season before in the playoffs, and we got to safeguard against this. So let's do something big because why? Because our time with LeBron is borrowed. And that is true. And you have to find ways to offset that, including figuring out a plan for both managing LeBron's first 50 to 60 games while also trying to win as many regular season games as possible. But you also have to have a process. And part of the problem with the idea of, an ethos where it's championship or bust, that is a great branding principle. And it should be something that you hold yourself to as an aspirational standard. But if it's literally every single season is championship or bust, you are going to do things wrong because that leaves you with very little wiggle room in terms of an actual process. And whoever they bring in needs to be a part of a process.
And it also leaves you just posturing all the time. Like, feeling like you have to, you create this expectation. And again, this is a franchise that should be trying to win every year. Some years you're going to have to say, you know what? We got to hit pause on this. We got to make a trade. We got to do something to rebuild our assets, whatever it might be. But the goal should be, we are going to put it is enormously expensive for people to go watch this team. It's a legacy franchise. Always they owe it to people that whenever possible, this, I'm sure we'll do a show on, busted up, not busted up, whatever. This is part of the reason I think, the Lakers need to try to drive this AD LeBron pairing as far as it can realistically go. But you still have to have an understanding of how the world works, really works. So you're not doing things for optics, you're doing things for basketball. I'm really excited to see how this goes. I'm going to be excited in some way, shape, or form for whoever they hire. It'll be interesting. It's always interesting when you hire a new coach. Terry Stotts, like I said, not an exciting name, but a very accomplished basketball coach. The storyline of a Frank Vogel, the storyline of JJ Redick.
The big thing to me, and we can quit on this, at least for me, when we're talking about the idea of what they owe their fans, the idea of always shooting for a championship. What they really should always be thinking about, to me, is, are we building in the right direction towards it? Because every season can't be about winning a championship, because every season you're not going to be realistically in the position to do it. But are you always taking steps forward? And the reason I say that is part of taking those steps forward is empowering a coach so that coach can be the best version of himself. That's part of the process.
Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to see the show, hang out with over 24,000 subscribers, leave questions and comments, tell us who you are excited about, not excited about in this coaching search, and more specifically, why. Are there any names that aren't being discussed that you think should be? The Lakers, by all accounts, will be taking their time with this. They are currently now only competing with the Wizards of Washington for the available coaches out there if Budenholzer, in fact, locks things up with Phoenix. So there isn't necessarily a massive sense of urgency. And Charles Lee, who went to Charlotte, by all accounts, was not super duper high on the Lakers list. Somebody they were interested in, but clearly not somebody they were going to accelerate the process for. So it's going to be interesting where they settle, who they start interviewing, and some of the names that might pop up there. We will see everybody on Monday.